Minimalism is not just a big meme, okay? It is a legitimate concept that should be valued and brought into consideration when you're choosing software and when you're writing software. And I want to talk about the reasons that I personally value minimalism. I want to actually get to looking at minimalism through the lens of the suckless programs and the suckless philosophy. And I want to end by talking about where do you actually find minimal programs and how do you find, better alternatives to the programs you're currently using? And I do also want to address, when does minimalism kind of become a meme? Because there definitely is a point at which it does. But starting out, why do I personally value minimalism when I'm looking for software? Well, I have a few reasons, okay? So first of all, I want software that I can read and audit myself. As somebody who doesn't necessarily know the language that it's in, right? You may or may not know I don't really have a background in programming. So something that's, hundreds of thousands of lines of code in something that in a language that I don't know is not really realistic for me to, vet before running. Whereas something that is, 1,000 lines of code, I can go through and read and figure out what's going on, even if I don't necessarily know the language that it's in. Okay, and by that token, I also want modifiable programs. And the more minimal something is and the more well written and clear and concise it is, the more easily it can be modified. And I like to, change things slightly to adjust to whatever I prefer in a program, right? If I want to, change a small thing here and there, or maybe remove something, maybe add something small, whatever, I like to do that, as you probably have seen. And lastly, I also want resource efficiency in programs, right? I want programs to be as optimized as they possibly can be so that I'm not, losing time, losing resources with bad programs. And, even though I'm not running on like a Y2K ThinkPad, right? I don't have older hardware. I have, relatively modern hardware here. I still care about resource efficiency because if I'm running something, thousands of times per day and I am losing, even just a few milliseconds, that is going to add up over, the days and years. Not to mention if you have, 10 million people running a piece of software, right? And it's, costing them multiple seconds every time they run it. How much time is getting lost overall, right? So those are my own, personal reasons for why I care about minimal software. And there's plenty of other great reasons that I didn't even mention that, didn't make it to the top of my list, right? So if you have other reasons that I didn't talk about, feel free to comment if you want to. But I wanted to go over the suckless philosophy here, and I wanted to sort of demonstrate it at first by actually looking at the size of, this is ST, and I've made a whole video about it, but I just wanted to show this program is only 2,800 lines, and this is literally the build with my patches in it too, so it's longer than it would be by default. And this is the sort of thing where, and of course this is just the main file, there's a couple other files in the program, but this is, the biggest file, and this is the sort of thing where realistically you can read through and understand what's going on. If you wanted to really understand this program, you can take, 30 minutes or an hour and go through and get a basic understanding of the gist of what's happening in each area. Obviously if you don't know C, which I don't know C, I'm not going to have a perfect understanding, but I can at least read through and, at the very least I can make sure it's not doing anything malicious, right? And I think that's pretty important. And, even though you might say, okay, something's free and open source, so therefore it must be okay to run, right? And that's definitely not the case, right? You have all sorts of programs that, like for example, take Firefox, right? Firefox has backdoors in it going to Mozilla, right? It has, it's reporting back to Big Brother, right? Do you really want to run that? Just because it's free and open source doesn't mean it's necessarily something that you would be okay with running. So that's why it's worth taking the time to actually vet software yourself and make sure, if you are serious about certain values that you have in the code that you want to be running on your system, right? If you're serious about that, it's worth looking at software yourself. Now, not everybody is going to be serious about that, and plenty of people will just say, Firefox does its job, I don't care. And I mean, that's fine. But if you are, valuing your privacy or valuing certain different aspects of whatever you're valuing, let's put it this way, whatever you're valuing, it's worth keeping that in mind as you're selecting software. So anyways, I wanted to look at the suckless philosophy here since I think it's a good example of writing, or the mission they have for writing well-written software, right? Since there's a lot of bad software out there, and I guess their goal is pretty much contributing software to the world that is, minimal, well-written, clear, They probably say it better than I would. Simplicity, clarity, frugality. They like to keep things simple, minimal, usable. Okay. So that is their goal, and I don't want to make this just a video like shilling for Socklist, but I wanted to just point them out as having this philosophy, since I think this is sort of an example of the direction projects should be going in. And there's plenty of other great developers who are also taking projects in this direction. But I wanted to, okay, yeah, down here there's this one sentence: simplicity is the heart of the Unix philosophy. And this is correct, right? The Unix philosophy at its core is do one thing and do it well, right? And the Socklist philosophy here is, you know, pretty much just a extension of the Unix philosophy. And a lot of those older software concepts have kind of, in some sense, gotten lost over the years. You know, there's plenty of these older, really important concepts, like the idea of using the least powerful language to accomplish a task, and, you know, plenty of other older software concepts that have kind of gotten lost. And I think Socklist, or the dev team behind Socklist, is trying to revive those sorts of concepts. But anyways, I wanted to go over the page here for their coding style, since I think this is a pretty worthwhile read. Even if you're not, you know, coding in C, it's got pretty good suggestions for how you should approach writing code, and I definitely feel that it's helpful for me. You know, if I'm gonna write like a shell script, for example, I want to go into it with the ideas of, you know, how I want it to end up, right? If I want a minimal end product that is, you know, as per the Unix philosophy, doing one thing, doing it well. If I want it to be efficient, if I want to be calling the least extra command possible, I have to keep that in mind as I work on the project, right? If I were to, you know, just go back after I finished it and then try to like refine it, right, I would end up with a mess of a project that would be very hard to refine. Whereas if I keep, you know, stylistic guidelines in mind as I'm working on it, right, I end up with a much better end product that requires a lot less refining. And the recommended reading they have here, these extra links, these are worth reading as well. I would definitely say that. So I'll put this link in the description here, this coding style page in the description, so you can go check it out if you want to. I also wanted to talk about the Stuff That Rocks page from Socklist, since they've got a bunch of programs, a list of programs not from them, that are still, you know, pretty compliant with their philosophy. And if you are looking for more minimal programs, this is one of the best places to find them. There's a bunch of other sites with lists, so I might make more videos looking at those lists at some point, but this is great because it's got all sorts of different applications, you know, everything from file managers to music players to IRC to notifications to password managers to, you know, pretty much everything you would need. So I think this is a great read if you are looking for, you know, some alternatives to programs you're currently using. And to be clear, it's not like every single program I'm always ever going to use is going to be the most minimal piece of software out there. And this is where I think also minimalism can kind of become a meme or a joke, right? You know, people using minimal software when it's really not needed, and it's just, you know, shooting yourself in the foot to try to be so minimal. And an example of this, right, I do a lot of photo editing, so I could, in theory, do all of that via image magic, right? I could, you know, crop an image, I can adjust, you know, tone, right? But I don't want to do that on the command line. I want to do that in a graphical application so I can actually see the image as I'm working on it. I want to, you know, see the adjustments I'm making. And this is probably a pretty obvious example, at least I hope it's an obvious example for, you know, not wanting to use something more minimal, because of course it makes sense for me to want to see what I'm working on as I'm working on it, because I might have ideas that I otherwise wouldn't have had, or I might realize that, oh, it actually would look better this way, right? Whereas if I'm just doing that, you know, completely blind just via commands, right? And this is not to say that there is no time for image magic. Of course I use image magic, it's a great tool, but, you know, if I'm going through and trying to edit photos, it doesn't make sense to do it the, you know, most minimal and simple way possible, because that would just be shooting myself in the foot, right? But anyways, I think that about covered what I wanted to cover. So I hope that you can keep minimalism in mind when you're selecting software, assuming that's something that you value. I definitely think it's worth valuing. I guess if you don't think it's something to value, then feel free to leave a comment disagreeing. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Peace!